allowed to do this pubcast in a pub or even in the pub garden? And when do you think outbound travel will start, realistically?
Unfortunately, I think opening pubs is probably a higher priority for the government because it gives economic benefit than overseas travel. Because I worry about what the government thinks about economic benefit of overseas travel. It's always been a balanced view. They need inbound travel, but people are unlikely to come at the moment. So really, they want people to spend the money in the UK rather than go overseas. And I don't think they can make it easy for us selling overseas holidays. So I don't think we're going to open up until the least the pubs open. Yeah. So not that I think 27th of May is wildly optimistic. 17th of May is wildly optimistic. I think it's when the pubs are open, which I'm told is going to be 21st of June or something like that ilk. And also one minor complaint: who is on this task force? Who is on this task force to be voting back on the 14th of April? Who is on it?
I thought they'd said pubs were opening for inside on the 17th of May and then all restrictions go on the 21st of June.
You may be right, but basically I don't think travel will occur until pubs are fully open. And I think the argument is if you're going to go on holiday, you're tested 3 times, PCR test on the way out, and you've got a test to get back into the country and a test to release, you're a lot less likely to infect somebody and somebody going down the local pub. So how they can deny people the ability to travel overseas when local pubs are open and venues are open, I completely don't get. Before that, I'm a little bit worried. It's just not a priority for them. Will, do you think?
Yeah, but they've said 17th of May, pubs, I think pub gardens are open in April, but 17th of May, pubs are open for 6 people indoors and overseas travel is possible again. So they've said on the 17th of May, you can do overseas travel. The problem is you don't know what the overseas countries are going to be saying about traveling there. So until there's clarity about whether we're going to be accepted in these overseas destinations, it's still difficult to make a holiday booking.
So which countries do you think might accept it? What do you think their criteria might be, Will?
I think a lot of them. I mean, if I take Spain as an example, if you look at the Majorcan Islands, they're desperate for the money, so they're just going to say yes.
No. Do you have to be vaccinated before you can go? Do you have to have a PCR test before you can go? Where do you think they're going to go on that ilk?
I think some countries will just say you can come because they'll look at where we are in infection rates. We're going to have a lot of people vaccinated by then. I don't think it's possible by the 21st of May to get everyone COVID passports. And I also think COVID passports are a problem because no 18-year-olds are getting the jab, so then they don't have a passport. And realistically, anyone under the age of 40 is unlikely to have their second jab until the end of the summer anyway, and that would cut the whole family market out. I think some of these overseas territories are just so desperate for tourism to come back that they're just going to say, come, we'll take the risk.
I mostly agree, because I think the economic imperative of getting Turkey operating, Greek islands operating, the Spanish islands operating is such that their local governments will force it. But I still think it will be a PCR test on the way out. I can't see testing disappearing this summer because it's too easy to leave it in place. If you take it away and you get an infection, you're going to get criticised. If you just leave it in place, depending on the cost, how much it will impact travel, really.
Yeah, you may be right. Either way, it's going to be a mess because there's going to be a lot of capacity put on in that period because people want to get their planes back flying and it's all going to book incredibly late. But I think there will be a big bounce because people are desperate to do stuff. But I also think that the underlying demand is not going to be where it was 18 months ago because of the economic circumstances people find themselves in.
I agree. Brooksy, you're being too quiet. So what percentage?
Not yet.
No, I'm going to ask you a question before you answer it. What percentage of sales compared to 2000 and the last good year of 2018-19 do you think we'll get this summer? What percentage?
60.
Okay. Reasonable guess, I think. I wouldn't argue with that. Maybe a bit lower. It depends on how quick the capacity can be added back, really, and when it can start. Because obviously the earlier it starts, the easier it is to have flying across the full summer. Starting up in August for a destination that finishes in October is a great idea in terms of profitability. Will, what do you think?
I don't think 60 is going to be a million miles away, but it's going to sell late because, fine, we can travel on the 17th of May. And I really don't think these dates are going to go back. I think if anything, they might come forward because the the vaccines are going so well and infection rates are dropping so quickly, I think it's going a lot better than everyone expected to. So I can't see the dates going back. But you just don't know what's going to happen in the overseas destinations. You don't know what's going to happen with vaccine testing. And I think that will put a lot of people off this year, and they'll do staycations because there's some certainty about it rather than messing around with refunds again.
What about the prices of staycations compared with overseas holidays? Because isn't it going to be really expensive to stay in the UK this summer?
Yeah, I think it probably already is.
The UK is expensive. I mean, that's one of the drivers why people go away on holiday, because it's just, I mean, not only is the weather better, but it's actually better value, particularly if you book an all-inclusive. I mean, we don't have all-inclusives in the UK. I mean, the UK is expensive.
So what are you doing, Brooksy? What's your plans?
Well, I've got 2 staycations booked. I'm doing a cycling for softies in June in Sussex, and I'm going to the Pig Hotel in late August. And then, as you know, we're all supposed to be on a little motor yacht in Croatia for a little mini cruise in the middle of August, which I'm quite hopeful I think might happen.
Yeah, no, I'm hopeful getting August. I think my first trip is July. A bit nervous about that when it's a short duration one. So you've got to look at the cost of testing, the hassle of testing, before you actually finalise the decision. But I do feel confident by July, you will be able to go on holiday. And August and September, nothing's a near certainty, but it's a near certainty. And then later on, short haul, I'm not convinced that the US is going to open up until September, October. And I don't think some other long haul destinations will open up. And I also think that places like Dubai, which are hubs, are going to have an issue because countries won't like people coming back from hubs. So how does that affect our long haul flying with Etihad and Emirates, etc., when so much of it goes through those hubs if you do a long haul? So I think long haul will have some pain.
I think if you think about the logic, why would you go long haul this summer? You don't need to go long haul. If you're going to go long haul, you might as well, go later in the year when it's cold, go in November, go in December. That's when you want to go long haul in the winter. And I don't think people are going to book long haul holidays for this summer. They're going to book places where they think, they got a chance of being able to go to.
Okay. So, Will, ultralight markets, obviously you're an experienced tour operator. I presume not good news for the tour operator, but also not good news for low-cost carriers that trying to get high load factors early. How do you think they're going to adapt?
I think pricing is going to be an issue for all of them because none of them will have managed yield curves that look like this with virtually no load factor as the day arrives and then selling everything over a 2 or 3 month period. So it's going to be messy. But, if you even look at what happened last year, I think that many of the airlines in particular just decided that this was as low as the price was going. And if they didn't fill the seats, they didn't fill the seats. And I think some of that will go on again this year. But I think people will book. I think if the countries open up and the airline side of things in particular don't put too much capacity on, I think they could have a half decent summer. But I think yields aren't going to be the norm because, this is an industry that would normally be booking up to 18 months before departure. And they're not going to start with great load factors. I mean, a lot of the tour operating companies are talking that at Christmas they had great bookings. Yes, probably from vouchers from the previous year. And then they've taken virtually none up until recently. And then they talk about being 600 and 1,000% up. Well, 1,000% up on 10 bookings is still not a lot of bookings.
No, I agree. The other thing I think is going to change is dynamic packaging as a percentage. Obviously, I'm operating that market in terms of insurance, and there's no supplier failure cover in the market. So anybody with a trust fund trying to dynamically package and release monies early to airlines and accommodation providers ain't happening. Can't do it. There's very little public liability insurance in the market, and there's a major risk of disruption from COVID. So ironically enough, the biggest capacity providers will be the low-cost carriers, but I think agents will only be able to buy from their holiday divisions. Because are you really going to package up EasyJet or Jet2 holidays and with your own stock, etc., if you can just buy their holidays? Is that going to be a massive boost to their holiday divisions this year?
I think it's definitely going to favour them because people want safety and they want to know that they're either going to get a refund or if the company does end up in trouble, the government's going to bail them out. And of course, that's the big advantage of packages. So I think you're right about dynamic packaging. I also think that the market has changed an awful lot since we last had a summer where there was a high proportion of dynamic packaging, because you've now got the major providers. EasyJet are going to prefer their own tour operator. Jet2, they want to sell the holidays through their own tour operator. TUI want to sell holidays through their own tour operator. So that leaves you a Ryanair that nobody really wants to deal with because it's a problem getting refunds. And of course, the massive provider the last summer that was open in terms of dynamic packaging and to people like On the Beach, etc., was Thomas Cook, and they're not there.
So how do you think the likes of On the Beach and Love and Travel Republic will fare without Thomas Cook, not wanting potentially to sell Ryanair, and the bigger EasyJet and TUI's, etc., trying to push them into their packages? Are they going to be starved of flight stock, potentially?
Well, they're either going to be starved of flight stock or they're going to be overpaying for it.
Why do you say overpaying, Will?
Because they're going to be offering, EasyJet will unashamedly, as an airline, offer a cheaper rate to their tour operator than they will to an online player.
Well, that's guaranteed in terms of the access fees, £6 per person per sector. But I think you're also right, because there is a clear differentiation. I know EasyJet and Jet2 dump seats at lower cost than in the marketplace into packages in an opaque way in order to get rid of seats. So I think you're absolutely right. The only thing I think will counterbalance that is the airlines need to shift a lot of seats. And coming back to dynamic packaging, if you've got scale like On the Beach and Love and Travel Republic, you can still get dynamically packaged. So they'll probably have a lot of seats to go at, even though there's some restrictions of the airlines wanting to sell packages. At the end of the day, the airlines will fill their seats whichever way they can. Do you agree, Will?
True. Yeah, no, I agree. And then that comes back to the question we posed earlier: how much capacity they put back on this summer? You know, if they try and put it all back on, there is, of course, going to be a wash of seats, and that's all they can do to get decent load factors. If they're sensible about the amount of capacity they put back on, and it could be a lot more control for them. I mean, EasyJet have taken some capacity out of the marketplace. TUI kind of have, because they didn't have the 737 Maxes running, but they're coming back into service now. So they've got the planes and they either fly them on holidays or keep them grounded. So a lot of the planes will just be taking off because they're there.
And also, I believe fuel prices are still quite low compared with previously. Obviously, with the global shutdown, it's a wash with aviation fuel sitting there that I believe is about 45% cheaper than it was 2 years ago. So I think there's a lot of incentive that any aircraft sitting on the ground where you've got fixed costs, fixed leased, semi-fixed staffing, and cheap fuel is going to be flown. So I do think capacity will come back into the marketplace probably faster than demand. And again, that can cause all sorts of imbalances, probably in favour of the parasites, my lovely friends, the OTAs, that dynamically package.
Steve, what do you think about the issue of reputational damage to some of the OTAs over their lack of refunds? Do you think that's going to come into play?
No, because I think everybody in the travel sector has done a bad job virtually. I think the only ones that probably can come out of it of any good favour is travel counsellors and a few other companies. But all the majors, On the Beach, Travel Republic, Love, have got some damage. Maybe it's more to a lesser extent. But it's the same as Ryanair. Right? At one point of it says, what idiot would ever book with Ryanair again if you're a travel agent after what they've done to us? Yeah, I probably will. I probably would.
Well, until their seat price is £10 cheaper.
Correct.
And as soon as that seat price is £10 cheaper, you go Ryanair.
So unfortunately, the same probably comes back to dynamic packaging and reputational damage. Yeah, it's damaged until you're £20 cheaper than the next person, and you book the cheapest because you want a deal.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, Steve, is all those OTAs, are they not all collectively damaged versus EasyJet holidays, Jet2 holidays, TUI, who are less damaged?
I think Jet2 came out extremely well, and I agree. I'm not quite sure TUI came out as smelling the roses as Jet2. I think Jet2 is the only one, from a trade perspective at least, came out in a very, very good position. And I think they've done a massive enhancement to their position in the trade because they did support, did refund, etc. Ryanair are definitely the worst, and then in between you've got the rest.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
So I think we've summarised the ultra late market. So who's best suited to take that market? Is it the online players, or will the customers go back to the high street, or will they go to home workers? What's going to happen, guys? What's the view?
Well, I think there'll be a lot of customers who've got, flights that they've got vouchers for. There'll be a lot of customers with holding some sort of deposit or some sort of refund credit note that they need to use with someone they've already booked with that they haven't been able to operate. So I think that'll be a decent chunk of the market. But I think customers will go with. I think price will be less important. I think they'll want to go with trust, a more trusted brand. I think that's going to be more important than ever this year.
It logically should. I do agree.
I agree with that.
So, okay.
I think retail is this year. Retail this year in particular is going to play a lesser role than it has done historically. I mean, TUI have now shut hundreds of their shops. Their retail portfolio is now relatively small. Even Hayes have shut a high proportion of their shops, particularly the ones they took from Thomas Cook. So there was a lot less shops in the marketplace than there was 18 months ago. And of course, the shops historically have been very good at selling the early stuff, and online has been good at the late stuff. And this is just a late market.
Do you not think there'll be a general kind of swing towards people wanting to go out to their local shops and wanting to shop and actually going? Because do you think people will be sick of online and will want to actually talk to human beings and get some of that interaction going back? Will that have an impact?
I think they want to go back to the pub. I'm not convinced they want to go back to a shop.
But Ian makes a good point. But here's what I think of it. So if you've been loyal to a shop over years and years, and you go down to see your local travel agent, the problem is through this crisis, they've all been shut for a year. So you haven't been able to go to that shop for a whole year. They're not allowed to open until the 17th of April. So these shops have all been shut pretty much for a whole year. You go down there, there's just a notice in the window saying back soon. They've not been there. So any relationship you had, you've lost, because anything you've done in travel in the last year has either been on the phone or online.
But I'm not sure. It depends what you're talking about, Will. Maybe in big cities, I agree with you. But I think in smaller towns and villages, these retail agents have a close relationship with their customers, and they're communicating with them. I'm on the board of a small retail agency chain, and they've been doing some cracking bookings in the last 4 weeks, whilst they've been closed, even though all their shops are closed. They do.
Sure.
They call the customers up.
I completely agree with you around small independent agents. They'll have those relationships, but even those agents are going to find they do more over the phone, more on Zoom calls, and more online than they did before this.
Yeah.
And also, being bluntly, if it comes quickly, online can scale massively quickly. Physical presence can't. Home workers can't. Yeah, you can only handle so many calls in an evening. Whereas online bookings, you can handle absolutely shitloads. So if it comes fast and hard, as I think it will occur, I think the online players or the large call centres are quite well positioned to take it. But coming back to a couple of other trends then. So hoteliers, I hear lots of different views here. So my view is most European hotels are dictated by not just the UK, but by Germany predominantly and other source markets. And it's my understanding that because of the lack of vaccinations, it's unlikely that outbound travel from Germany and other source markets is going to occur to a large extent this summer. That means there will be an awash of cheap hotel deals. And conversely, there's only 60% of the capacity in flying-wise that can leave the UK. So there must be absolutely tons of hotels, tons of cheap deals. So therefore, my view is pricing will be cheaper this summer than ever before, because the airlines won't be controlled of the load factor yield curve as much, and there's loads and loads of empty hotels. Am I off my head, or will that help counterbalance some of the cost of travelling in terms of testing?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of very quiet hotels because, for them to fill up, everyone needs to get back to 100% of the capacity they had in summer 19 this summer. And, in terms of the big marketplaces, the UK is the furthest ahead of any country in the world on vaccination, other than I think it's Israel. So the rest of Europe are behind, which means that their traveling is likely to start later. So I think hoteliers continue to have a problem, and you wonder whether all the hotels will open this year. If people aren't going to start traveling till June and July, do you open a hotel for a 3-month period, gear all your staff up, and then close it all down again 2 or 3 months later? Maybe you don't, and you say, I've got to leave it mothballed.
So another interesting trend, if there's not enough demand, will you have whole ghost resorts still? Because I went out to Mallorca, and we went down to Magaluf to a restaurant, and my God, I've never seen such a ghost town.
Sorry, you found a restaurant open in Magaluf?
No, nearby. And similar when we went out to Tenerife.
Mickey was open all summer, but that's €100 for a champagne there, so nobody goes.
Okay, so what else is going to change then, Brooksy? Yep. So is the average holiday duration going to change? Is the type of accommodation people go for going to change? What do you think?
Yeah, I think people are going to upgrade. I think a lot of people have been saving. A lot of people have been on furlough, and as long as furlough gets extended and as long as they keep their jobs, people haven't had much to spend on. So I think people will potentially, people that stayed in a 4-star hotel in the past might go for a 5-star. I think people will want to go for 2 weeks rather than a week. I think city breaks are going to be off the menu to start with, because people are going to say, look, if I've got to go through the aggravation of getting tested on the way out there and potentially even tested on the way back, I'm not going to do that for 3 nights. So I think longer stays, higher value properties, and definitely shorter haul than not long haul, and probably not cruise. Not sure when that will restart either.
We'll come back to cruise because it's a big topic. I broadly agree with everything you're saying.
I agree with all of that. I agree with all of that, Steve. But also, I think that short term as well, you're going to find villas and self-catering doing really well for people who want to be even safer.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think all-inclusive will struggle because the cost of delivering all-inclusive will go up. So I don't think buffets will be quite as easily freely available. Because again, even though we're maybe vaccinated, other countries won't, and they might have social distance in place, and you have to sit at different tables, etc., etc. I completely agree between the haves and the have-nots, but I slightly disagree on if you've been on furlough. I think if you've been on furlough, you're probably in the have-not brigade because you're quite unsure about your job going forward. I think the haves are the ones that have been in jobs, been working, because they haven't been able to go out, and they've definitely saved more. As a country, we've saved more over the last 6 months, but the haves have even more disposable income because they haven't been buying that new car. They haven't been moving house. Some have, because obviously there's stamp duty, holiday, etc. But there's a lot of pent-up cash sitting in bank accounts, etc. that I think will fuel demand. But interestingly enough, I think that demand will be split between an ultra late summer and an ultra early summer 22. Because I think people will be booking the bucket list long haul holidays for next year now. I think they will be booking even their summer holidays next year now because they want something to look forward to. Do you agree with that, guys?
Well, I've seen the evidence. All the travel companies I'm involved in, they're seeing 2022 bookings quite often outselling 2021, and any bookings for 2021. You're not really seeing anyone booking before August. It's sort of August, September, and October. August, September, October, and 2022. That's where the demand is.
Well, you got a view?
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think that's part of the bounce back. It's the pent-up demand because people haven't been, and it's the haves, as you were calling them, who've got a load of money saved and are wanting to blow it on a special holiday because they've missed a whole year out. But I think there is enough knots who are worried about their future employment and worried about the debt that they've gone into over this period, whether that's through credit cards or mortgage arrears or whatever, that the fundamental demand when things settle down has to short term be lower. It has to be.
Well, yeah, I completely agree, but it doesn't feel like we've entered recession yet. And I think until we come out of COVID,
Well, apart from
furlough ends, I don't think the country will feel like it's going into recession yet. And I think that's a big dampener for next year. Yes, there is demand.
Apart from the economy shrinking by 10%.
I don't think people are seeing that or feeling that. So you're talking mathematically correct, but then you end furlough and the economy will bounce back in the next 3 or 4 months. So I would argue in people's minds,
I agree with that.
we haven't hit recession.
Yeah, but we've got what, 600,000 or 700,000 more unemployed people, and then a whole bunch of people. You know, the evidence we always looked at, well, wherever I've been in travel, is that the biggest barrier to people booking holidays is not necessarily the cash that they have or haven't got in their bank account. It's the security they feel in their job. So if you've got another 700,000 people without a job, that's a lot of family households who've got a problem. And then there's a whole bunch on top of that who are worried about whether their job is still going to be there because their company's in trouble. So I think there's enough people unemployed or worried about their employment that when the bounce back is gone and people are blowing their money in the expensive holiday, until the economy starts going back and the employment starts to get back to where they were, the fundamentals have to be down because people aren't going to be able to afford it.
Can't argue with that, unfortunately. Even though I'm trying to cheer myself up in this travel industry, any demand is better than no demand at the moment. So coming back,
I think what it says, Will, is that, you know, if you're an operator or an agent, you know, you're better off if you're in the more discerning end of the market. That's for sure.
I'm sure that's right. Yeah, I'm sure that's right because you know, this will have damaged wealthy people, I'm sure, but they're still going to be wealthy.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk.
You know, the people.
Oh, sorry, Will.
Well, I was just going to say that, you know, clearly the people who've been damaged the most, the people who've completely lost their jobs. But then there's a whole raft of people on furlough who must be, you know, have serious financial problems. And that includes a lot of middle management who'd be the type of people who would book, you know, these £600, £700, £800 per person holidays during July and August, which is, you know, the mass market. But, you know, you're used to taking 50,000 home a year and you get furloughed in 80% of a max number and you've got mortgage repayments to make, you very quickly get into financial problems.
Completely agree. So should we look at the financial problems being imposed by the CAA, which I can't say I blame them for doing, because we've had a bonding structure that is virtually wiped out by Thomas Cook going bust and will probably completely be depleted by over this winter by other companies going bust as they try to restart. And the CAA is pushing everybody to trust funds, which I agree with. But the biggest problem with trust funds is if you're selling holidays now for 22, you've got the marketing costs now, but you can't release the profit or even pay some of the suppliers until the customer returns from holiday in 22. So basically we're getting a demand squeeze, and now we're getting a regulatory massive squeeze. I think it's going to happen because my understanding is CAA is saying, no, everybody, you've got to go to trust funds. If you want to have a traditional bond, we may be charging something like £20 a passenger because it's high risk to us. Yeah, but we now want you to go into trust funds where you can't even release agents' commissions until customer returns from holiday, which is obviously going to squeeze agents as well as tour operators. So are the regulators right to do that? Do they have a choice? And how is that going to damage the market? It's another big question for me. Start with you, Will, because you're looking concerned.
Listen, my understanding is that the CAA had an insurance policy for some of the biggest tour operators. So I'm not sure they were damaged a lot by the failure of Thomas Cook. I'm sure the insurance policy was. I suspect that it will get more difficult after Thomas Cook to get insurance for that kind of stuff. So I think what's clear with the amount of companies that must be in financial trouble now is they have to find a longer term solution to this issue. And they can't rely on a trust fund that is underfunded and allowing people to finance the businesses with customer cash and leaving the CAA and the government to bail these businesses out. So they do need to find a solution.
So you think they are going to toughen up the terms of trust funds then?
I think that is one of their obvious solutions. I don't know where they're going on it, but I can't believe they can sit back after Thomas Cook and coronavirus and not change things.
Dramatically?
I think probably dramatically. I mean, I don't think, you know, I guess everyone over the next few months are going to be looking at renewing their bonds. And I think that puts the AA in an incredibly difficult position because a lot of the accounts are going to look pretty woeful. Now, on the one hand, that will mean there's an awful lot of companies out there that are technically bust. On the other hand, if you start pulling the bonds for them, they're going to create the problem that they don't want to create. And I'm hoping for the industry's sake that the CAA give people some leeway to allow themselves to trade out of the issues that have been caused by the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that Will makes a good point there. It's all about timing, Steve, because you can't impose trust funds on travel businesses when they've virtually got no cash. You know, it's a double whammy. So I think you're right. I think it will happen. The CAA have actually stated that they are going to be issuing a consultation paper very, very shortly. And they've stated that they're looking to make changes to the way in which they operate the ATOL scheme. So I like you, I think that's signalling that they want to move to trust funds. But they've got to give travel businesses time to recover from this pandemic and time to shore up their balance sheets and build up their cash flow, because obviously trust funds is going to strangle them from cash. And I think the other thing is that we can't have we can't double dip here. It wouldn't be fair on travel companies to impose that they have to have a trust fund, but also to have bonding as well in addition. I mean, you can't have both. So I think that's an issue. And I think the third issue is that it's really, really hard to get bonding right now. There are very, very few underwriters left in the market because they've all run to the hills because of they're scared of travel companies going bust. They don't want to put up bonds for travel companies. So that's a massive issue as well. So all of these things, it needs thinking through. You can't knee jerk it, and you've got to think it through, and you've got to give travel companies time to put a plan in place.
So I think that leads me on to my next question, which is an interesting one. Why have more travel companies not gone bust yet? What saved them?
Well, I think the furlough schemes had a massive impact. I think the bounce back loans has helped smaller companies. I think the CBILS have helped larger companies. And I think that not having a trust fund has allowed travel companies to still have income by selling 2022. Refund credit notes has allowed travel companies to hold on to their customers' cash.
Well, can I jump in there, Brooksy, because that's the one for me. I think refund credit notes have actually deferred a number of collapses. And I think as we start trading again, I'm very concerned that customers demanding their holidays or demanding their money back because they can will be the trigger to push some businesses under. And I think that's what we're going to see over the next 3 or 4 months.
Well, I think it comes back to, when will customers, passengers be allowed to actually travel? I think that's the key thing. So, if you've got to think about it this way. If you accepted a refund credit note, then your psyche would be that actually I do want to take this holiday. I just can't go now. I'm not allowed to travel, but I do actually want it. And I believe I'll be able to take it in the future. At what point in time do you say, actually, to hell with this, I just can't see it ever happening. I'm just going to get my cash back. And I think that's the critical thing here. So if customers believe that they've got a chance to get away this summer and they can spend their refund credit note and have their holiday this summer, then I think travel companies, should generally be okay. If it becomes obvious that this date of 17th May is going to slip and slip and slip and slip, and then they think, oh, it's just not going to happen this year. That's 2 years now. I've not been able to go on holiday. sorry, I'm just going to get my money back, then you're probably right.
But Brooksy, what happens if they haven't got the money to actually deliver the customer's refund credit note? They ain't got the money to pay suppliers.
Well, then that's then the CA comes back to the ATOL scheme again and the company's bonds, isn't it? Because they're covered. The refund credit notes are covered under those schemes.
But I think that will. All I'm gently pointing out is I think restarting will crystallise the collapse of a number of companies for the CAA. I think it's inevitable.
Maybe I think we're all involved in sort of small tour operators around the UK, and we've read all the stuff around people like TUI and EasyJet and the amount of money they borrow from the government. The big companies have the option of raising things like bonds and share capital from their shareholders. So probably eventually they'll work out how to refinance it, and they've got bankers helping them. It's the medium and small size companies who basically, when this pandemic hit, they had two options: watch their company go bust or take the government money. So of course everyone's taking the government money. What we don't know is how all of that money is going to get paid back when the repayments start. And I think that's the big issue. Have people really got plans and how they're going to pay this money back without sending their company under? And I suspect a load of people at the moment are just taking the money because that keeps you going. The only other option is to close. So you keep yourself going by taking the money and you worry about paying it back later. But at some point, there is a huge refinancing and huge debt to repay back right across our industry and many hospitality businesses that have had virtually no income for a year. No,
I agree. Even the big guys, though, aren't they going to struggle under some of these debt mountains? For example, TUI has operated a very successful program of differentiated stock, 80% plus differentiated. But doesn't that require a large amount of guarantees of the hotels, a large amount of investment? And if you've got all this debt mounting, are you going to be given the money to do that? Does it stretch that far, or are you just filling the hole you've got?
I don't think it makes a difference to the differentiated product, because that's just part of your cost of sales. And this is a company that was making nearly $1 billion, 2 years ago. And there's no reason, if all that capacity comes back, that they can't make that and more, because I think most businesses have used the pandemic as an opportunity to be fairly ruthless in taking costs out, and would, I think, be foolish to put it all back into the business. So arguably, when we get back to normal capacity in 22 or 23 or whenever it comes, they could arguably make more. Of course, they've got a huge debt amount to pay back, but I think that won't stop the operations. What it will stop is investment in new systems. It'll stop investment in owning new hotels. It'll stop dividends to shareholders maybe for a while. I think management bonuses will be a problem to get paid out. I think the German government, even put in a restriction saying until you've paid the debt back to the German government, you can't pay management discretionary amounts of money. So it changes the way the businesses are run, but the fundamentals of what they do daily, I don't think it will. They're not going to be going on an acquisition trail because they've got a huge debt mountain. But you look at EasyJet, nearly the other end of the spectrum. They've taken some debt on, but a lot of the financing they're done by selling planes and leasing them back. So they're not really taking on a huge amount of unrecoverable debt. Of course, it means there's now more cash going out of the business going forward as they make lease payments rather than owning the planes. But they've not had to go out and take out big repayable bonds, because when those leases end, the planes either go back or they release them.
Okay, interesting one. Is there a chance for a new airline? Is there a chance for a new tour operator that hasn't got the COVID legacy, comes in, as demand picks up with, because there's cheap planes out there where people have gone bust, there's cheap fuel out there. Yeah, if you haven't been damaged and you've got good relationship hotels, could it be new airlines and new tour operators come in?
I think it's definitely a new airline, because you're right. I think there's an awful lot of cheap capacity out there, because most airlines have returned planes. And, in the end, you start up an airline now and you've got none of the legacy costs that even some of the low cost guys have now, because they're no longer brand new airlines. So I think that there may well be, and there's a gap in the marketplace for someone providing leisure flights to people like OTAs and retail agents who want to do download packaging, because it's more difficult now when the 3 of the 4 big leisure airlines out of the UK are affiliated with a tour operator.
Yeah, I'm saying, because the OTA model works best when there's excess beds, excess seats. when there's a lack of seats or lack of control, they probably do need to evolve their model, but they will need an airline partner to help them with that. So I do think that on the beaches, the Travel Republics of Labs, and even smaller guys would actively support probably a downstream airline, somebody who's flying from, I don't know, Ibiza or Cyprus into the UK or Turkey into the UK, so that you can offer multiple UK airports.
Or you just sit down with Wizz Air and say, can you start doing more flights out of the UK and into holiday destinations, and we'll support you.
Yeah, I can see that happening. Cruise. Let's have that lovely cruise discussion, because both of you got views. Massive assets or massive issues? Which one would you say? Brooksy, you first.
Both. I think we've always said that cruise is going to be one of the last ones to restart, but these guys have got they've got deep pockets, and they'll be around. Most of the big guys will be around. You've got to have many billions to run a cruise line. The only one that's gone bust was Cruise and Maritime, which is a relatively small operator, and they went quite quickly into the pandemic last year. I think they went last sort of May. Otherwise, the others will just they just sit and wait. But that doesn't mean to say they are, of course, they're taking on more and more debt, and it must have been really, really tough for them. But they'll take the long-term view, and I still think cruising is a very popular form of holiday.
Cool. Right, we're going to go to the last round, which is a quick fire, yes or no, winner or loser. So you're not allowed to justify your comments. You just have to say yes or winner or yes loser. So I'll kick off with chucking some names out there. Hayes Travel.
What happens if it's no winner?
We ignore you. Which is it?
What did you say, Steve?
It's either got to be winner or loser. Hayes Travel.
Okay. I didn't hear the...
Right, I'm just going to chuck names out there, Will, and you have to go winner or loser. Hayes Travel.
Winner.
Brooksy.
Loser.
Loser. Mid-Counties. Co-op.
Loser.
Winner.
Winner. Travel Network. Group.
Winner.
Winner.
Winner. Chicken dinner. Travel counsellors.
Winner.
Winner.
Biggest winner yet. Tour operators. EasyJet Holidays.
Winner.
Winner eventually.
Winner eventually. Jet2 Holidays.
Winner.
Big winner.
Massive winner. TUI.
Winner.
Winner.
Loser. Destinations. Spain.
Winner.
Winner.
Loser. Turkey.
They're 6.5% vaccinated their country. They're right up there. I'm going to go winner.
Winner.
Winner. Cyprus.
Winner.
Winner.
Winner. Greece and Greek islands.
Winner.
Winner.
Longhaul.
Loser.
Loser.
Loser. And that draws this round and this pubcast to an end. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and efforts.
Excellent. Cheers, guys. You didn't have a drink,
Cheers,
Will.